What's going on, guys? It's Michael here from GBU. Today we are going to show you how to modify your Hi-Capa. So essentially we're going to pull this thing completely apart, do the trigger, the hammer, all of the springs and stuff like so. So the one that we will be doing today will be the Golden Eagle 333-6, which is going to be one of our biggest sellers so far this year and half of last year as well. So we will do a complete tear down and replace most of the parts that you do see on this pistol with some colored ones or upgraded parts as such. So nonetheless, follow along and we'll see what we get up to. So what we do have in front of us here is the Golden Eagle 333-6. Now this is obviously a Hi-Capa base or a 2011 base, which does mean that it has a thicker mag than a 1911. Now they do actually hold the same amount of gels, which is going to be around the 11 to 12 gels. It just depends how it kind of stacks, like so. So we'll set that one to the side. And to simply start pulling this thing apart, you want to slide back, and you want to slide to the first notch as you see just here, and simply, I like to just put my finger inside of the slide and you'll be able to push out the slide catch like so. Now we aren't going to keep this, we're going to chuck this away. The slide comes off very simply like so. So we'll start with the upper, as that's the most easiest and quickest part that we can do, and then we'll move into the a bit more complicated side of things in the lower. So just like a syringe, you want to pull the guide plug back and then simply release it like so. Now be careful when you do release it, because sometimes it can shoot across the room and hit things or lose things, etc. So these parts here we aren't going to keep, so we're going to chuck these away as well. And then we are going to replace the outer barrel with a nice shiny silver one, because the theme for this build today is going to be red and silver. So now that that's in, slide it back in like so. Then we'll grab our upgraded recoil spring, slide it onto the guide rod, and then we also have a short stroked alloy guide plug here that we did make. Again, just like a syringe, kind of hold it in like so, in and release, and then just like that your upper is complete. So we'll set that to the side, and now we'll move on to the lower itself. So for this one here, we are going to start off with a 3mm, give that a little tap. Now again, we're not going to keep the original magwell because we are going to be replacing it. So this thing here is called a Trident sear. Now this sits on your hammer and also your trigger. So when you do pull the trigger, it actually creates a space for the hammer to cycle forward. So again, we'll keep that, set it to the side. Our 3mm, simply take out these grip screws like so. And then I do like to use a drill on the Phillips head here because it's quicker. Set it to the side, and just like that, we now have the frame separated from the grip. So now we'll go ahead and we'll do the grip first, and then we'll move on to the frame. So to get to the actual trigger itself, you're going to need a small flathead screwdriver, as there is a pin here within the mag release that you're going to have to push and then turn, and that will allow that to come out like so. So we'll keep that because we do need the spring. And then we have our trigger and our trigger bar. Now this here is held in by a little pin just here. So we're going to knock that out and replace it with an alloy trigger. So simply just find a hard surface or an edge so we can push that out. So that's the old trigger. We don't need that, so we will chuck that away. And then simply grab our new trigger, which is going to be this nice little red one. Slide it on and just make sure that the holes kind of line up, otherwise it'll just be a nightmare trying to make sure everything's sweet. Like so. And again, find a hard edge and push that pin in like so. So now that that's done, we can grab our grip again. Simply slide it in like so. So that's that one. And then back to the mag release, we're going to release this pin because we're going to keep it. So we'll keep the spring and the pin, get rid of the mag release because we don't need it. Grab our new fancy one. In like so. Very simple, very quick. And then this one just goes in here. And then we're just going to release that pin, and now it's not going nowhere. That trigger's in place, and it's good to go. Alright, so onto the frame itself and replacing the hammer. Now it does have the 2 thumb safeties here on the outside. Now you just want to remove these. Sometimes you do have to get like a little flat head and just kind of pry it out a bit. And then with this one here on the back side, just be very cautious when you're pulling it apart because it does have a spring and a pin that is kind of resting on it like so. These ones right here. And if you do lose those, then unfortunately the thumb safeties will just flap up and down, and then the slide catch won't actually work because it won't have the pressure holding it in place for when it's needed as such. Now to get into the hammer section, you are going to need a 2mm hex head. Now there are some frames that do require a small Phillips head, so use the one that you use to take the Phillips head that holds the frame to the grip. So again, we'll pull that screw out, kind of set it to the side so you don't lose it. Now when you do pull this apart, be careful because you do actually have your valve knocker here, which is then connected to another spring, and if you lose that, then it can be a pain in the backside to try and replace it. Now when replacing the hammer or changing out the hammer, kind of leave everything in here like so, because there's not really any need to remove everything in there just to change this. Now again, just like the trigger, you want to kind of find a hard surface, and you do want to push this pin out. This one's a bit more held in there, so we use a hammer. So we got a new fancy hammer, and then we've got our hammer strut. Now you always want to make sure when you're putting the hammer strut in that it actually kicks out and it doesn't actually kick in, because if it kicks in like so, then it's not going to work and you'll just have to pull the whole thing apart again just to change it to the correct way. So make sure it always kicks out. So just like the trigger, you just want to make sure that everything lines up. A slight tap, and then that is your hammer done. So now we can simply go ahead and install that back in, slide it over the post, make sure that it lines up correctly with the hemisphere and everything's working well. So now that that's in, we'll go ahead and put our top plate back on. Just make sure that you haven't misplaced the springs or anything like so. Make sure there's no massive gap in here, because sometimes you will see it'll kick and it'll leave like a decent sized gap right along this line just here. Alright, sweet, so that hammer's in. Now we can go ahead and attach the frame to the grip like so. Now my screwdriver is flat. But thankfully it's good enough just to kind of put it in there like so. Now we want to grab our new grip screws. Now these ones here are going to be a 2.5mm compared to the standard ones, which are a 3mm. So essentially just like so. Now you don't want to put these in until you have the lower completely built, just because you're going to need access to the hammer, as when these go in, the hammer needs to be fully cycled back like so to allow the opening. So the hammer needs to be fully back, and that way there's a nice clearance within the hammer housing for the thumb safeties to kind of go in there and just mesh well. So now we'll start off with our tridents here, just like so. Make sure everything kind of lines up to where it's supposed to be. Put that little strut down. We'll grab our beaver tail. And again, just make sure everything's kind of lined up, nothing's out of place, because it will be a headache. And then this one here, I do like to kind of tilt it back to allow the strut to fall into place. Hold it like so. We'll grab our new mag well. And we will secure that like so. So now that the lower is completely done, we can now go ahead and put the detent springs and pins back in and put the thumb safeties as well. So hammer back. Now with these, you do want the smaller pin to go in first, and essentially you want this here to be, this end to be towards the trigger and the thinner part to be towards the rear. Now that's simply so the spring can sit on it and allow the detent spring and pins to do their correct purpose. So just like so. So you will have to try and line up this little triangle here with the triangle hole here. And then there you have it. So that is the lower complete, the upper's complete. So now we'll just go ahead and do the smaller details, which are going to be changing out the mag plate on the mag, putting our extended pad here, and then putting our extended slide catch as well. So let's go ahead and get that sorted. So slides on, and then we have our nice little extended slide catch. So that's that. Now let's put this little pad on. So for this one here, you will need a 2mm hex head, and then essentially just going to slide it through like so. But I do like to grab a couple of shims just to kind of build out the profile, so when we push the mag release in, it actually allows enough clearance to let the magazine go, because sometimes you might find that it might be a little too shallow and it won't actually give you enough clearance to drop the mag. So now that that's kind of in like so, that's going to give us enough clearance to drop the magazine. So now we will go ahead and swap out the mag base so it kind of suits the rest of the build. So this one here, you will need a 1.5mm hex head to simply release the grub screw that's in the back side of the mag plate, which is going to secure this little pin here. So don't lose this pin while you're in this process. Simply slide it on, put the pin in, and kind of just hold it with the base of your finger so that it doesn't really go anywhere. Give it a nice tighten. And there you have it. The mag base is on. Now we've got one final step for this particular build, and that's going to be changing out the gas route here from a standard one to the 9-bore one. And then this build is complete. So this one here again does have a pin that holds it in. Make sure that you're kind of holding down the spring so that nothing really shoots out, because again, if you lose stuff, then it becomes a pain to try and replace it or find the components if it's scattered across the room. Just like so. And there you have it. Gas route is installed. Gas it up, make sure that there's no leaks. Mag in. There you have it, guys. That is a very simple and fast way on how to upgrade your Golden Eagle Hi-Capa or any Hi-Capa that you do have in mind. Again, if there's any questions, don't hesitate to reach out and we will help you where we can. So there you have it, guys. As simple as it can be, that is how you upgrade your Hi-Capa at today's standards, with all of the colored parts and the upgraded springs and gas routes like so. Now, if this is something that you'd like, come on down and see us at 7/18 Bailey Crescent in Southport on the Gold Coast. Otherwise, these parts, all this blaster is online right now as I speak. Peace out.